Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time out of your schedules to attend this session. My name is Jack. I'm a librarian here at the Sunnyvale Public Library. I am very pleased to welcome you to this program to discuss the sustainability class and how we can reclaim ecology for everyone. To present this evening, then, we have two very special guests, the co-authors of the new book, The Sustainability Class, How to Take Back Our Future from Lifestyle Environmentalists. Vijay Kolinjivadi and Aaron Vansintjan are both here with us tonight. Thank you both for joining us. A little more about our presenters. Vijay Kolinjivadi is an assistant professor in sustainable and equitable economies at the School for Community and Public Affairs at Concordia University in Montreal. He is also a co-editor of the political ecology blog Uneven Earth. He has been published in Al Jazeera, New Internationalist, Truthout, and The Conversation. And Aaron Vansintjan is the founder and co-editor of the aforementioned Uneven Earth and co-author of the book, The Future Is Degrowth. His research draws on urban geography, urban political ecology, ecological economics, and food studies. He has been published in The Guardian, Truthout, openDemocracy, and The Ecologist. So, before I have Vijay and Aaron properly introduce themselves, once again, we do ask that you turn off your cameras and mute yourself during the presentation. If you do have any questions for them, please feel free to place them into the chat, and we will make sure to attend to those towards the end of the talk. With that, Vijay and Aaron, I'll let you take it from here whenever you guys are ready.
Thanks so much, Jack. And I have to say that was the perfect pronunciation of our last names. I don't know anyone who has done it any better. Thanks so much. Um, yeah, so we started writing working on this book 5 years ago. Um, it was, uh, I guess, a very different time than now. But you might recognize a few things that are in the book. Um, the way that the book started was Vijay wrote an article in Al Jazeera with this provocative title, Why a Hipster Vegan Green Tech Economy is Not Sustainable. And it was based out of what we were seeing in Montreal, which is where we are currently, where we live. And what we were seeing was that there was this kind of gentrification happening that was promising kind of this green, new, clean, sustainable city living. And but at the same time, it was excluding a lot of people and making a lot of neighborhoods more difficult to live in for low income people. So I think the article really caught onto something because it really kind of bizarrely went kind of viral. Um, and shortly after, Vijay was asked um, uh, by a book agent to saying, "Hey, this is actually something that needs to be talked about more. Do you want to write a book about it?" I don't know if you have any more.
Yeah, and so I think the aesthetics of greening became, this was, as you see, 2019 was really the issue I think that caught on, that there's something that people were feeling is not right about a lot of the more than just greenwash, but actually just the aesthetics of sustainability, the aesthetics of being green, the aesthetics of what that does, and but how that aesthetic is translating into very exclusive neighborhoods and kicking people out and actually doing the very opposite of what it intends to be doing, which is to build relations, build community, create a livable world for us and for our future generations. It just seemed to be doing the opposite. So I think that's maybe what struck the chord. And so we wanted to build on that with this book and go deeper into understanding how the environment has become an arena for creating yeah, for splitting people apart, actually further and further apart through class relations. Um, so with that, maybe we'll start explaining a little bit about what the book is about. So we, in spite of all of the advancements and efforts, towards claims towards sustainability and being green and taking a consideration of the environment, we are in a situation where we're worse off than we've ever been. So we are continuing to produce to emit more fossil fuel, and this is only, it's actually turbocharging. This graph is going until 2024, but if we're talking about 2026, and since the latest administration in the US and elsewhere in the world, we're seeing really a turbocharging of fossil fuel emissions. So we're nowhere near meeting the Paris Climate Agreement goals, which were set in 2015. So this meme is actually quite appropriate for the situation that we're in, and that many places in the world are experiencing.
And I would just say here, what we were interested in exploring was how people, a certain group of people, can want to be green, want to be better for the world, want to be sustainable, but end up being exclusive. And I think you see that now where you're seeing a kind of recognition that environmentalism kind of feels to a lot of people th this kind of elitist thing, this exclusive thing. And we wanted to like understand how did that happen? Why is it? And then what can be done to make environmentalism for everybody? Because the reality is uh this this is the reality. Like we're not denying that reality. We do need changes, but what we need to get to is to a place where um environmentalism isn't seen as something that is just for some people who happen to be well off. Um, so yeah, we to do that, we looked at this idea of the sustainability class, and this is a class of people who practice and live sustainability through their livelihood, their ideas. Um, but more often than not, it's becomes something that's exclusive. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and the idea came about just building off of some of the work of others, some other concepts like the creative class, which was, many urban planners have come to know about as a way by which, yeah, those who working in the creative sectors were those where were at the forefront of investment in cities, and that's where sort of urban renewal projects and investment were being concentrated in areas where those people working in the creative sectors, the creative class sectors, were sort of congregating. And so the sustainability class is sort of playing along with that, except it's using environmentalism and the sort of care about the environment as being connected to that same logic as the creative class, which, what resulted in a lot of exclusion in cities, creating whole neighborhoods and places in cities that were sort of built around these exclusive condos and canals and areas that are very exclusive in cities that are sort of designed for those working in those particular in that particular economic sector. And so, yeah, so that's kind of the origins of how we coined the sustainability, or built further off of this idea, the sustainability class. So maybe in this presentation, we'll talk about three different archetypes of how we define the sustainability class. The first one is very recognizable. It's really playing on the sort of aesthetic element, and the what we call the lifestyle environmentalists. So this is this sort of focus on consumption, on virtue signaling, wanting to show others, that you are, doing your part. And that's usually done through some sort of either through some sort of aesthetic, some sort of yeah, performance or some sort of consumption, in more cases than not. And we see this very frequently in cafes, in bars, with very specific forms of interior design with plants, green walls. Yeah, so th this is very recognizable, and it's something that you see in cities around the world. Um, Branding, in particular, this is some examples. This is an example from Belgium, where, it's kind of hard to see in the photo, but it's like introducing zero cotton. It's the same jeans, but greener. It's hotels that kind of claim that you can be green. You see things like sustainable aviation fuel. You see examples when we were in Los Angeles. We this is the sort of green environmentalism that is often promoted as examples of good examples, right? So this is where when our publisher told us you should go to Los Angeles because that's the epicenter of the sort of green lifestyle that people are aspiring towards. So when we went there, we saw a lot of this sort of branding, and there's, in the city of Venice Beach, we passed some shops where, with every purchase, a tree would be planted, just as an example of this sort of performative greening. Some people who have gone to Los Angeles may recognize the Erewhon supermarket, which is a very high-end, almost like it has like a cult following online, and it's just really over the top of this kind of lifestyle environmentalism, where you had I thought this example was really strong of sustainable fresh caught fish shipped from the Faroe Islands all the way to Los Angeles, branded as sustainable salmon. Yeah, lots of wellness shots of different kinds, very high prices associated with them. Neighborhoods, just, kind of presenting this sort of vacuous message of what environmentalism means. And yet it's something seems very much amiss when we see these messages, and we recognize the situation in the world. The lifestyle environmentalists we also consider as a lot of protests around, that we've seen in the last few years. Some of them are very well-meaning, but ultimately they don't really have a core or key political message that they gravitate around. They don't really center around systemic or structural issues that are causing environmental problems. And so we often just see groupings of people who wanted something to change, and these sorts of banners like "There's no Planet B," things like that. But ultimately, those statements don't really lead to specific strategies for action. And so this is the kind of thing that we kind of grouped as well as lifestyle environmentalism. The wellness culture is very much a part of it, and this was also some shots that we took in Los Angeles, just representing that sort of lifestyle, including how particular lifestyles can be branded, and including through real estate. So people who, certification can then, it's a way of commodifying those values that people have for inclusivity and wellness and the environment. Yeah, so just to continue, this was just in Venice Beach area where you saw a lot of exclusive housing. There was very exquisite landscaping. Again, like environmental groups were coming and tree planting and doing a lot of work around rehabilitation in the neighborhood. But at the same time, this is, so yeah, you would see a lot of this, a lot of tree boxes, landscaping. And it's very interesting because you would think when you see this, that there's a lot of effort towards environmental care or consciousness. But when you go a little bit deeper and you scratch at the surface, you start to see that, hey, some of these plants aren't necessarily native. to the area. And secondly, in the case of Venice, they were being planted very strategically for specific reasons, particularly to keep out unhoused people. Because in this case, you see spiky plants, aloe, and cacti in some cases that were being planted in boxes in strategic locations so that people who could not afford, who increasingly cannot afford housing, not only in Venice but in other parts of LA, are sort of visibly are physically excluded through the vegetation that's planted. And so and yet this is kind of framed as environmentalism when it's actually a form of weaponry. It's literally like using nature to keep people away. And in Los Angeles, and in Venice and in Los Angeles and elsewhere in the country and beyond, we see, this was just walking by the neighborhood, we saw, a real estate or a housing yeah,
Agency.
agency that was just in Venice that was just sort of glorifying, how housing prices are rising. So while for homeowners this looks good because then they can sell their home and make profit, but the other side of this is that this just means that people can't afford homes because the property values have risen so much.
But and I would just back up here for a second to like talk a little bit more about Venice as a neighborhood. You're all in California, maybe you're familiar with its history, but it really kind of started in the 1960s with, the hippie counterculture. This was a neighborhood of mostly cottages, very small bungalows, right by the ocean, um, and really kind of down and out, and a lot of hippies and I would say like more lefty people moved to this neighborhood, um, and it had all kinds of things. It had like a leftist newspaper. It had a very strong uh, counterculture, and increasingly it became this very hip neighborhood that people kept moving to. So the Venice Canal neighborhood by the 90s was uh, basically like so expensive that the people, even the hippies who moved there in the 60s, could no longer afford it. But also, it was a primarily black neighborhood, so that by the time that we were there, that black community had like been very hugely pushed out, could no longer afford to live there. Also, a strong Latino neighborhood that like barely was able to stay there. And then you had these small little literally cottages, that were valued at the time 1.8 million. It's probably more now. So yeah, very kind of stark progression from counterculture to extremely exclusive, with the destruction of a community, while at the same time presenting itself as green, ethical, with social justice in mind, uh, with branding everywhere about how they're LGBTQ positive and embracing sustainable livelihoods, but at the same time, literally putting cacti in the on the sidewalks to keep out homeless people. So it was a very stark kind of uh, illustration of what sustainability class looks like.
Hmm. And maybe just to throw in a little bit of a like wrench in this, or like this is maybe a thing to discuss or think about for discussion later. But as in this kind of a context where it's becoming increasingly difficult, increasingly unaffordable and exclusive, you get a lot of people who see this kind of aesthetics as quote, what's wrong with the sort of woke culture because of this, of what we're seeing. And so I think what we wanted to do with the book was to actually agree that this is very problematic. Not, but for the wrong reasons. It's like it's not that we are, on the same side as those who are trying to, get rid of DEI initiatives and things like that. But we're saying that this without taking consideration of the history of places and understanding this broader relationship of exclusion associated with inclusivity, so-called inclusivity and environmentalism and things like that, you're bound to create a backlash against it. You're bound to create a situation where you have people who see anyone who's supporting these sorts of values as being somebody to attack. But it's coming precisely because of these forms of exclusion. And so this is what we wanted to raise attention to as well in the book. And so this picture, I mean, this is in Venice. You can just see how clearly stark it is between the cottages that have been really exclusive and really, multi-million-dollar homes now that have been fenced off, and just outside you have homeless people who are, yeah, just trying to make a living, and so in really difficult conditions. So this is really something that you see in Venice. Um, and meanwhile, when we were doing our sort of research for the book, we spoke to a lot of people who claimed to be yeah who expressed their sort of focus on environmentalism and making life more green and environmentally conscious in the city. And so one person we spoke to was an interior designer and architect who was essentially working to flip homes, what he called like ugly homes in the city, in different parts of LA, in Venice, and elsewhere, to make them more what he called community, more inclusive for the community, including by constructing or creating big windows in the homes. So this is something that he described as creating a connection with people on the street. But it actually, essentially what he was doing, what he is a house flipper. And so so you see these signs and you see them in cities across the US, buying homes through fast cash and giving large loans to people to basically leave the premises quite soon. And so with that amount of money, it seems like a lot, but it won't go very far for those families where they will not be able to use that money to find another place to live. So it's very insidious in a way. Yeah, maybe you want to explain this or
Oh, yeah, sure. So I mean, just an illustration of it of this is we hung out at an unhoused encampment, um, where community organizers were providing essential services. This is this organization, Street Watch LA. Um, we're providing essential services for unhoused people um, in the middle of like the downtown core, it like in exactly the same areas that are being flipped and highly gentrified for with a lot of this branding of like this is green, LEED certified sustainable condos being developed. Um, and oh, this is just a little anecdote. These folks, Urban Alchemy, this is like I would say that this is like ethically sourced policing. This is a company that is a nonprofit that the LAPD outsources patrolling unhoused communities to. Um, and so while we were hanging out with these folks at Street Watch LA, th uh, this I don't know, squad from Urban Alchemy came and was telling everyone to leave told us to stop taking photos of them. Um, and it was pretty jarring because, we could literally just see like the policing of the unhoused community happen. And right after this, we had a meeting at the Beverly Hills Hilton Hotel to talk with some CEO guy about regenerative agriculture. Um, so it's just like, you see these things happen, the kind of exclusion, the policing, under a different name, like under the name of some uh, NGO called Urban Alchemy. And the reason why they're ethically sourced policing is that they hire people, ex-convicts, like people who've just come out of the prison system. So it's like a very underpaid, uh, low-tier job, and they're basically hired to police unhoused people, work that even the LAPD wants to outsource. Um, yeah, just kind of like the contrasts and exclusions in LA were very stark for us.
And maybe just one thing to add there is the Street Watch, what they were doing was based on mutual aid, but also on building relationships with people in the community that were made to be excluded and who, listening to the stories of the people who were made homeless, made unhoused, it's really shocking because it's not like in many cases, some unfortunate series of events took place that resulted in their situation. So it wasn't like, yeah, it essentially can happen to anyone. And so what we witness here is actually a kind of ecological relation of people supporting others to survive and to thrive and to feel in community, which is actually what we're looking for when we talk about ecology. And this is something we were realizing in our research trip into Los Angeles and writing this book, is that the green environmentalism that, that we're trying to look for is actually this. It's this sort of relationship building. It's not the green condos and the LEED certified buildings and the exclusion there. It is the relationships that people make with those who need them. So this was something quite important for us in describing what ecology is. So the second archetype, the first archetype being the lifestyle environmentalist, the second one is the green modernist. So being in the heart of Silicon Valley, I'm sure you are all very familiar with this kind of framing in which, every single problem can be addressed with technology, and that technology will be sort of our savior in a way, and that there are some streams who, think that will will supersede us, and that will be the basis of the future. And so this is really this belief that growth above economic growth can and must extend, must continue infinitely, and will continue to there's no boundaries essentially that cannot be overcome. Every single boundary can be overcome. There are no planetary limits. There's nothing that the Promethean mind cannot control. So that's the main sort of logic around the green modernists. One of the main approaches that they adopt is the circular economy, which is this idea that all resources can be recycled or reused and brought back into use and reused as inputs in the same production system. So in this process, you would end up using less resources because you would upcycle, the use of those resources through in the economic throughput, and then that would also result in reduced wastes. But there's a significant contradiction here in two different aspects. One, in terms of the high energy costs that are needed to do this sort of work. You can't, recycle oil. You can't recycle plastic. You can try to do those things, but if you do them, they will be enormously energy intensive. So you have to use more energy in order to do this sort of work. And in the assumption that you have a constantly growing economy, this becomes a little bit in a way of a circular argument because you are not going to get out of the contradictions of endless growth. And so a circular economy is essentially based on, you have limited returns that you can make with every time that you bring back this sort of used resources.
Well, yeah, just to put it another way, like every time, we can only recycle with the technology we have, we can only recycle, say about 8% of all the things that we use on a daily basis. But every t time you recycle it, you're need energy to do that. You need chemicals to do that. So inputs, and also you're degrading it even more. So like you can only recycle a plastic bottle so many times before it becomes something unusable. But you're also each time putting in more energy. But now if every day more plastic bottles are being made, um, and then you just see this infinitely escalating situation, that even if you increase the technology of being able to recycle more and more things, like you're just running on a treadmill that's going faster and faster. Um,
So, the other aspect that the green modernists sort of believe is this idea of the environmental Kuznets curve, which basically depicts this or represents this idea that eventually all growing economies will reach a plateau where at a certain point of growth, they will start investing in regeneration of the environmental and social components that were lost through the rise of the growth period. So examples like Europe, Northern Europe, Australia, Canada are often used as examples of this environmental Kuznets curve, where once they become post-industrial economies, then they start to reduce their environmental impacts. However, this is extremely faulty as an argument because number one, in the process of growth, if we assume every country was going to grow to follow this curve, we might be crossing a threshold that we cannot, a planetary threshold, which could result in irreversible impacts. So, for example, as climate continues to warm, we are seeing a positive feedback with respects to polar ice melt. And so if every country was to do this, then that's going to result in a point where this model simply won't work. And the second and perhaps more striking element is that this is just completely false, even from its basic premises, because you're never actually declining in environmental impact as a post-industrial country. You're simply shifting your environmental costs to other places. And so this is a very fundamental aspect of the sustainability class because 20, 30 years ago, more, I mean, 30, 40 years ago, say in the 1980s and 90s, we didn't have this sort of service economy or the creative class economy where you could work in front of your laptop in a cafe and with green plants all around you. And then you can claim that you are in a much more environmental economy than you were in the past. We didn't have that because those industries, manufacturing industries, took place in the cities of developed in the developed world. So we had that dirty manufacturing sector taking place right where we live. Now all of those sectors have been shifted to other places, to India, to China, and increasingly to Africa. And so this is a fallacy as an argument, but this is largely what green modernists and eco-modernists claim, that we can somehow become relieved of our environmental impacts if we just continue to grow. Yeah.
um, well, I feel like this one is maybe also
Yeah.
you'd be good at this, but the last archetype, the green administrators, this is kind of more the uh, globe trotting, city hopping, uh, jet flying, NGO class that goes from conference to conference, tries to solve the world's problems, And things that they're, constantly they're like, we're saving the world, we're getting a new agreement done, we're um, creating more policies around nature-based solutions or climate resilience, climate adaptation, where we're creating budgets of billions of dollars that can invest in sustainable technologies. So we call these the green administrators. They're basically a group of people who kind of dream big, and are in the halls of power. But really, what they end up doing is they're kind of generating all this new language, and managing these funds that are claimed to be, uh, for investing in sustainability. Um,
Yeah. So as an example, this was some scenes from the Middle East and North Africa Climate Week, which took place just before the climate COP in Dubai in 2023. And this took place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and in the Saudis are trying increasingly to present themselves as the sustainability champions of the world, particularly with respect to the Paris Agreement and to other global commitments. And so this was in one of the pavilions for the Climate Week, in which Saudi Aramco, which is the largest oil producing company of Saudi Arabia, which of course is the world's biggest oil producer. And so they were committing to planting 10 billion trees across Saudi Arabia, keeping in mind that Saudi Arabia is a desert country. And so there was just a lot of this sort of material that you'd see in a lot of the promotional in the pavilions that they want to present and represent themselves as doing this sort of greening work. Um, and yeah, here Aramco supports traditional beekeepers, providing training and equipment to 2,000 farmers. It's not to say that this is not necessarily true in what they're doing, but
like
we're not like
this is
yeah.
the largest like oil producer in the world, and the Saudi royal family is with their assets combined, is like the richest family in the world.
Hmm.
Just in context, you know.
Yeah, and just to illustrate that, being at this meeting was extremely lavish. You know, there were no a lot of taxpayer money was going into a lot of climate rhetoric and discourse, which was actually just spaces for the elite to rub shoulders and to essentially engage in trade deals around energy, which is essentially what a lot of the climate meetings are about. We think they're about climate change, but they're actually really discussions around energy use. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
so we don't have a lot of time in the presentation left, but we're kind of nearing the end here. But we wanted to try to bring this all together into one image, and this is maybe looks like a bit of a goofy image, or cartoon. Um, but it's like almost like the centerpiece of our book, so it's worth explaining a bit. Okay, so at the top you've got this pie, and it says pi, and pi stands for purity, innovation, and efficiency. So we talk in our book about how the sustainability class, what brings the green administrators, the green modernists, and the lifestyle environmentalists together is this shared ideology of purity, innovation, and efficiency, the pie. Um, Purity is this idea that, it kind of manifests in different ways, but this idea that you can clean yourself, you can kind of separate yourself from the dirty society, maybe live in nature, um, and kind of live this sterile life, and that makes you green. Innovation is this idea that we just have to innovate to get ourselves out of the situation. We just have to be ahead of the curve and always uh, embrace the newest technology. And efficiency is this idea that um, it's kind of more insidious. It's this idea that we have to uh, kind of if we just make our the things we have more efficient, they're going to make us more sustainable. So you buy the right kind of fridge, you buy the right kind of electric car, um, you make sure that you buy carbon offsets with your flight, and that way you can make sure that you're being more efficient and you're saving the climate. So any other kind of
Yeah, I think yeah. That's the main thing, but and so we represented this as sort of a pie in the sky vision. Literally, this no impact person who is holding the pie or reaching for the pie in the sky is actually standing on this tower, which is like a Jenga tower. It's crumbling with every time that there's a replacement of something. There's sort of fundamental life support systems that the earth provides, certain relationships that are essential ecosystem sort of sustainability at the ecosystem level is being replaced with each time that we strive for this pie. And so as we know, playing the Jenga game, that the tower will eventually collapse. So this is sort of yeah, drawn out sort of illustration or metaphor of what the sustainability class is doing. It means well, but it's just going about it a very wrong way. So to wrap up, I guess in a nutshell, like what we can say with what's wrong with liberal environmentalism, it just putting it flatly, like it just doesn't work. As we described from the beginning, we're seeing much more emissions. We're at a situation more dire than ever. So this is clearly not working. We can't make ski resorts in deserts and yachts somehow environmentally better because they're more energy efficient. They are exclusive, and their existence is very much, the existence of billionaires, the existence of people who have that much money and can promote these sorts of projects is simply is not compatible with a living environment, with a living planet. Renewable energy. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so like this idea, we're constantly hearing renewables are expanding at an exponential rate. But when you actually look at the total energy that is being used, renewables are kind of like a top up. So if this is the amount of oil, fossil fuel based energy, renewables are just a tiny little slice. And when you zoom in on that slice, it looks like it's getting bigger, but when you zoom out, it's just a little top up. And what you're seeing is that a lot of uh, fossil fuel companies are, yes, investing in renewables, but it's kind of a strategy to just uh, you know, keep just invest in everything, and oil is your main thing that you're going to make profits from, but you can always invest in the other thing. That's not contradictory. So this idea of fossil fuel plus. Renewables are have become this thing that just top up fossil fuel use, but don't actually replace it. We don't see fossil fuel use going down. We haven't. We're still not seeing it. We're seeing rates of change, but we're not seeing a decline. And we're nowhere near from that.
Yeah, the third point, which is something that we're seeing in recent years, and since 2024, basically is this push towards large-scale infrastructure projects under the banner of national security, war and militarism. This is just absolutely not in the direction of where we need to go. It's turbocharging our problems. And so we didn't not even mentioned here, but data centers and AI, artificial intelligence, is extremely energy and water intensive for very minimal, in the vast majority of cases, minimal benefits. So it's kind of like an overwhelming use of resources, environmental impacts with very minimal benefits. So all of this is just sort of adding to our problems.
Yeah, we talked a little bit already about this idea of purity. I think it comes down to how we imagine the environment as something that is beyond us, that we're either ruining because of our dirty society, or we're saving by separating it from us, where we kind of um, try to divide society from the environment. But the environment, we are the environment. Um, it's not a place to separate from or to purify or to make pristine. We can't take humans out of the environment. That also is, it's a very Western idea of thinking about it. And also, I'll just go on to number five. This is something that has come up a lot since we've published the book in our conversations about the book. Um, and it's also something that like impelled us to write the book in the first place. Clearly, we're right now we're sitting in Vijay's office. Vijay's a professor. I work at a nonprofit food organization. We are part of the sustainability class, and this book was our way of thinking through, like some of the contradictions of our lives. As we're going from conference to conference, as we're like, trying to limit our impact on the environment. And something that came up a lot was this idea of shame versus an idea of guilt. Um, and what we noticed is that uh, often people from a middle class background, um, middle and upper middle class, will express kind of this guilt of like of being in a privileged position, and wanting to make it better. And so that's when you start thinking, okay, how can I live in a way that has less of an impact? So it becomes natural to then try to live a more sustainable lifestyle. And that in itself is not bad, but sustainability has become such a big industry that now we're offered sustainable tourism packages and sustainable green condos, um, and Erewhon. So like it's like they're really figuring out a way to take advantage of middle class and upper middle class guilt. And that's something that we've experienced too. But then there's a flip side to this, which is also shame. A lot of people who can't achieve a certain level of status might often feel shame about their position. And then it becomes more about, how do I achieve a higher position? And but also what can happen a lot of the time is people feeling seeing people in elite positions and seeing them kind of performatively display sustainability and environmentalism, and that looks very exclusive to a lot of people. Um, yeah, I don't know if you.
Yeah, maybe to go to the last point, I think that the thing with liberal environmentalism is it's because it means well, it's focused too much on exactly on the sort of performative aspects, on consumption and lifestyle, on efficiency, on the pie in the sky vision, but it's failing to meet people where they're actually at. And that's why one of the reasons why we see this growing tendency towards a right wing growing, because precisely because people's needs are not being met. And so they're looking for a way out. They're looking for a solution. And so liberal environmentalism simply isn't addressing people's needs, particularly around affordable housing, food. And this was, even this was like a few years back before the current sort of crises that we're experiencing with inflation. And the affordability crisis. So it's simply ramping up in many ways. And so if the approach continues to ignore, the people's needs where they're at, we're going to see further and further dislocation and more division.
And I would just say, like, from a policy perspective, if we think of like the Biden era, like environmental policies, we're talking about like tax rebates. We're talking about, like how can we invest in like solar panels on people's rooftops? We're talking about like installing more charging stations for electric vehicles. Um, but what if instead of thinking about environmentalism as this kind of top up on a middle class lifestyle, we instead think of environmentalism as um, the uh, guaranteeing affordable housing, guaranteeing affordable food, guaranteeing transportation. And I mean, that sounds maybe a little bit far-fetched, but um, I'll just say it clearly, like a city that has a large working class community that is able to survive, that is able to stay in the city, will be a city that has a far smaller carbon footprint. Uh, if people have affordable mass transit, if people have housing that that they can stay in city neighborhoods, they're just already you have a lot smaller environmental footprint just when we're talking about numbers, but also in a ecological, if we're thinking in terms of ecology, which is about relationships, then you start seeing environmentalism as like, how do you build a city with relationships based on solidarity, based on connection, and based on supporting each other. So I that's to me, this liberal environmentalism where we think of like what benefits can we provide middle class people to be more sustainable, and instead think of environmentalism as what type of basic needs can we meet in a way that supports everybody, and that will be environmental and ecological.
Mhm. And just to wrap up with a positive example of that, precisely that, of people creating an ecology of solidarity, an ecology of support for each other through these sorts of relationships where they live. In this town of the city of Boyle Heights in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Tenants Union was we showed up at a support sort of rally for a house, a group of tenants that were being basically evicted by their landlord and by the developer to tell them that if they would pay if they would receive a lump sum of payment, basically, if they just turned over their keys. And so the Los Angeles Tenant Union was there to say, no, we're there to support you to know that that the landlord and the developer cannot, they cannot do this. We're not going to allow them to do this. And there was food, people, took the effort to learn Spanish, to learn different languages so that they could connect with each other, to support each other when they needed to, even though they came from very different backgrounds, from different parts of the city. Um, and in Boyle Heights, the community has really been focusing exactly on what Aaron was mentioning, on trying to secure basic needs. But because the government is not there, the city government, the municipality, is not there present to represent their needs, but is instead packaging things for the middle class, through tree planting and transport that raises property values, it was the community in Boyle Heights that had to take action in their own hands. And they did that by, for example, putting benches around trees that were planted, and then the children in the community were painting murals on the benches so that the elderly in the community could sit on them and take shade from the summer heat. And so in that way, they were kind of reappropriating the tree that was planted by the city, which, if you just plant a tree, if you're planting trees without that sort of community buy-in, then it could raise property values. But what the community did was reclaim, in a way, that tree so that it had meaning for people in the community and served a particular need. In this case, shade. So it was just some small examples of how people were taking back their environments where they live, even though, they are living and working in very, very difficult conditions. And this again is before this was in 2022. So the situation is all the more tough. And so yeah, it's just examples that we can use, and we can look at what ecology can really look like.
Yeah, also just to say, like, this organization, the Unión de Vecinos, the Union of Neighbors, um, they they would throw these parties in alleys with movie screenings, popcorn, food, games, but they would also organize uh, actions where they would uh, stop tenants from being evicted from their buildings. They would make sure that tenants would meet each other in the building. It might be new white tenants, uh, getting them to kind of connect with the majority Latina community, and they also helped form this bigger Los Angeles-wide organization called the Los Angeles Tenants Union. So, it starts small in the neighborhood, but that those kind of connections of solidarity, the relationship building, can have really immense impacts. And I really like this slogan that you see in the corner there on one of the steps, keep Beverly Hills out of Boyle Heights. To me, that kind of encapsulated our whole journey in Los Angeles, where we started poolside of the Beverly Hills Hilton Hotel, and ended up in Boyle Heights, and saw uh, very different visions of environmentalism.
So maybe we'll leave it there, and welcome any questions or reflections.
Yeah, Aaron and Vijay, thank you so much for your presentation. That was quite revealing. And as one of the comments said, thought-provoking and quite thorough. So thank you very much for being with us tonight. I'd like to start off with one question. I know we have a couple comments in the chat. And I won't take too much more of your time. I know we're a little bit past the hour. The book and quite explicitly the presentation this evening, argues that this green tech service economy that you mentioned has co-opted this well-intentioned concern to sell, lifestyle environmentalism. And that this has actually made things even more unsustainable for real working class people. I'm curious then, how do you respond to folks or people who say, well, isn't some green action better than nothing? Or like when people get defensive or maybe have that knee-jerk reaction of that shame and that guilt, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, the irony of that is, I would say that some of those actions, it's not that the actions, I think that the argument that, well, it's better to do something than nothing. The art, the irony there is that doing that something is making the situation even worse, So it's not even about doing something is better than nothing. It's like, if you are, if
It's like a flamethrower on a fire.
yeah, that's the analogy or the metaphor we've used, like fighting a fire with a flamethrower. You think that you're using something that's going to address the problem, but you're actually just you are exploding it further because you, in the case of greening, you may be raising property values, which are creating even more forms of exclusion, despite the fact that your footprint, let's say, might be a little bit less. The reality is your investments, the investments of the wealthiest people are completely outweighing all of your benefits, all of the sort of efficiency improvements you're making before you even wake up in the morning. So it's like, we're not tackling the issue where it has to be. We have to tackle the issue where it starts, not, we are being sort of sold solutions that are yeah, allowing those responsible, the biggest climate criminals, to continue doing what they've been doing for decades.
Yeah, I also, I mean, I think when we talk about this, it's like important to we can lead to all these big numbers of who has a bigger impact or not. But there just two little examples. Like when if you book a flight and they ask you, do you want to buy carbon offsets for your flight? Um, More often than not, those can be those are very often quite detrimental because basically it's companies that through weird little schemes pay other companies to then plant trees in an area where it's not even controlled or it's not even clear if there were trees there before or not. Sometimes local people are evicted from those areas to plant the trees. Sometimes the trees are planted, but they're just plantations, and within a few years, they're burnt down by a forest fire anyway. So it's like, you're making this one click, and it feels maybe like you're doing the right thing in the moment, but it's this whole industry that has been set up uh, for you in that moment to feel a bit better. The other thing I would say is like just on a personal level, like I've been there too, like spending 2 hours trying to research like the most sustainable pants I could buy, um, but what if I spent that 2 hours, walking outside and like literally just going to a community meeting? I would uh, feel a lot less, like I would be a have spent a lot less time on the internet, that's for sure. But I would also, have met a few people, um, and made some connections, and probably feel a little bit better too. So yeah, it's like, you know, it's it's good to have this feeling that you want to do better and you want to change things, but sometimes the answer isn't where we're presented it to be. Um,
Mhm.
it's not on the airplane ticket, I would say.
There's a couple of comments in the chat that kind of dovetail nicely with some of the other questions I was going to ask you both. But one of the first ones during the presentation was Christina asked each of you if you knew about this new endeavor called California Forever, which I believe is an effort to build a city in Solano County for 400,000 people, but it would also uh, pave over about 17,000 acres of non-irrigated farmland, coincidentally or coincident enough. Um, and this kind of, I guess again dovetails into a question I was going to ask, which these tech folks say that this is going to be the most sustainable city ever constructed in the country, and I'm sure they have their metrics that they can cite for us. But what gets lost when we reduce climate to, a technical problem, I guess. Like what is left out of that conversation when we only frame it this way? If that makes sense.
Yeah. So I love this example. We got really obsessed with these kinds of schemes in our book, and we found like many, many like dozens of these kinds of ideas all around the world.
From biodiversity in Malaysia to Woven City in Japan to Neom in Saudi Arabia, all of them resemble this sort of California forever
Yeah.
vision.
Eco City in Vietnam.
Hmm.
Um, and like Neom, for example, uh, uh, literally it's a city in the desert in Saudi Arabia that was promised to be the most sustainable city. Literally evicted 70,000 tribes people from their land, and has led to like uncounted but potentially over 100,000 deaths of migrant workers in construction, in trying to build this city, which is, kind of mind-blowing. And what you see with these kinds of projects is, yeah, they have to create this pure space. They have to promise these innovative technologies, smart technologies, surveillance technologies, different kinds of supposedly green technologies, and it's also all about efficiency. It's all about like the most high-tech efficient technology. But then when you actually look at the environmental footprint of the people who live there, and the lifestyle that you're making it possible for those people to live there and that you're supporting, their environmental footprint is vastly outpaces that of normal people. Um,
To
yeah.
put it bluntly, I mean, these are anti-people projects, essentially. They are areas meant for the ultra-rich to settle in and to have, their needs and resources and dreams and visions met. And everyone who is underfoot of them will either be, their workers or will be removed forcibly if necessary. And so this is a very colonial, it's a classic colonial trope. It's the same thing that, we saw across North America with settler, colonial the with indigenous people being removed from their land. It's no different from that. And this is so an anti-people project, as we saw in the example here with the eviction of the tents, the urban alchemy, moving the people away from these condos, the areas where the condos were. This is any kind of anti-people project can never be ecological because it's always excluding and pushing people away and then putting people into harm's way, essentially. If you put people into harm's way, you're not thinking about ecology. I think you can't get more clear than that.
We'll ask one more question before I let you guys go, I promise. Another question in the chat asks about, where do we go next from here? People want to learn more. I was curious, the two of you write or believe that you say, sustainability is about building people power, excuse me, to reimagine the world. So for folks in the audience tonight, or maybe we'll watch the recording, hopefully, what does people power building look like in practice, or where can we start from here? And maybe what do you hope readers will get? They take away one thing from the book.
Yeah. Uh, we uh we talked about a few different things. So one, the book is not a blueprint or a model. There's plenty of really amazing books out there that, give a description of like what kinds of policies would be good. And definitely I think it's very worthwhile to look into, which government policies are would be beneficial for like an actual environmentally sustainable future. Um, but we wanted to really focus on, like, uh, just to put it plainly, you're a person who wants to make the world a better place. You want to be sustainable. What do you do? Clearly, like a lot of what we've shown is not the right thing to do. So what else do you do? I mean, I think it starts looking at, looking around you, seeing what's up, who's doing things, like the Union de Vecinos, who's building solidarity and relationships with neighbors, with people around you, with people in the workplace. Um, it could involve what was the words? Frisky, risky,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, yeah, I think just, stepping out of your comfort zone, really. I think, if we have one message you want to get across, it's like, don't worry so much about the tote bag, or the electric car, and what your neighbors are going to think about you if you do or don't, if you don't have one or whatever, and focus your efforts, on, what you're doing to support others in your community. How are you supporting people who need that support. And in that process, you're creating a different kind of environment. When we talk about ecology and environments, we're talking about the relationships that are built through people. It's through those relationships that we create new worlds around us. We create, new living spaces. That's how we care for each other. We care for the non-human world around us because of those relationships. And so if you give up, if you were to care less about the tote bag and more about those relationships, and less about the electric vehicle, less about, what's more efficient or what's not, because those things are ultimately not what it's about. What it's really about, what we're really trying to achieve with a sort of ecological transition is one where, and with a people-powered sort of vision, is one where we're connecting with others and working and building towards a future that's supporting everyone, not just the elite, not just and actually not even, it's not just the elite, it's like not the elite. We don't want to, that's not a world that we want. We don't want a California forever vision that's a world that's just for the elite. We don't want that. Or a neon. We want a world that's for everyone. That's kind of the premise of of our book.
And it's a wonderful place to wrap things up. Thank you both so much for your presentation tonight and for your time for being here. A reminder to those, the book is The Sustainability Class, How to Take Back Our Future from Lifestyle Environmentalists. The library just purchased a copy. It should be in the building soon, so be on the lookout in the catalog for that. And I, of course, encourage you all to look into both Vijay and Aaron's work beyond the book on Uneven Earth and beyond. Uh, Gentlemen, thank you both for being with here tonight. And we thank you guys for joining us for this session. Really appreciate your time as well. So thank you again, and have a lovely rest of your evening.
thanks so much, Jack, for making this happen. Thanks everyone for coming, and support your local library.
Yes.
Yes, so true. Thanks, guys.
Have a good evening. Thank you so much.